Set. Okay, so good evening, everyone. I call the Policy Committee meeting to order at May 16th at 7:01. Okay, so jumping into it this evening, the first RPS policy up for review is 1331. It was last revised on 8/24/20. As per the fall Shipman and Goodwin update, they have revised this policy in light of sections 86 and 87 of June Special Session Public Act number 21-1. The law revises the definition of smoking. It clarifies the prohibition of smoking extends to any area of a school building, and it extends the prohibition against using electronic nicotine delivery system or vapor product on school grounds or in a school to also prohibit use of electronic cannabis delivery system in such locations. So let's take a look at policy 1331. I think the purpose of this policy is quite clear. It's to acknowledge a prohibition against smoking in RPS. The updated revisions here on page 1, I just wanted to go over them and where they are in the Public Act. I think it's important because we will see them in other policies as well this evening. This language here on page 1 reflects revisions in Public Act 21-1, sections 86 and 87. So if you look where it says any area shall mean the interior, that sentence is section 86 of Public Act 21-1. Cannabis is section 86. Electronic cannabis is from section 87. It's found on page 138 of the Act. The next paragraph is section 87. The next paragraph, school-sponsored activities. That is Connecticut General Statute 10-233AH. So I just thought it would be important to go over that in our notes because they do come up a lot tonight in our other policies. The next paragraph, smoke or smoking, that is section 86. I do have a recommendation for the committee to consider on this paragraph of smoke or smoking. If you go actually to the Public Act, the wording is a little different than it is written here. So I'd like us to consider it. The Public Act says smoke or smoking means the, and then in brackets, lighting or carrying the burning of a lighted cigar, cigarette, pipe, or any other similar device. So they left out the lighting or carrying. Any thoughts, opinions on that? That's how it's written in the Public Act. Kent?
Doesn't the burning take part of that? Because if you're carrying an unlit or a non-burning cigarette or cigar, then I think technically you're not in violation, even though the intent to smoke, I don't think is a violation yet.
So that's a great question, Ken. And when I did a little digging into the student discipline policy, we do talk about possession, sale, distribution, use, or consumption. So I'm wondering,
would that be of cannabis or of tobacco too? Like if somebody has cigarettes, that I don't know. Maybe I should.
Sure. So let me grab that. It is in the student policy 5114, and it's part 3, number 15 on page 6 of 27 of the student discipline policy. So on top it says possession, sale, distribution, use, or consumption of tobacco, electronic nicotine delivery systems, example, e-cigarettes. We're adding in electronic cannabis, vapor products, or the unlawful possession, sale, distribution, use, or consumption of drugs, narcotics, or alcoholic beverages. So it's interesting because I see your point, absolutely, right? If you're burning it, well, then would you be lighting it? Or is it lighted? It's lighted already, right?
Yeah.
Or is it just in your pocket?
Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
So, thank you. So right now, I think we're talking about policy 1000, which is community versus students. So I would expect it to be very different for students to have possession versus the 1000 series.
Sure, that's a good point.
So I think I agree with you, Karen,
Yeah.
is that I think that's why it's different with the lit versus not lit, possession versus not.
Yeah, that makes sense, actually. I like that.
Because an adult could have a box of cigarettes,
but not lighting them.
where kids can't.
That makes sense.
Okay, good point. No, I'm glad we had this conversation just to clarify, right? For true transparency.
Thank you.
Ken?
Rachel, just before we move on, I actually had a question about the 2 paragraphs above that. Is there a reason that we're splitting out the electronic delivery system? Can't we just say electronic delivery system used to simulate smoking in the delivery of cannabis or tobacco, or nicotine or tobacco? Yeah, cannabis or nicotine, and make it 1 paragraph?
I guess in theory we can. It's just that the law.
Okay, well, that's a good enough reason.
Yeah.
The law expressly. Okay.
Any other questions on this first page? These are all really good questions.
And I just in the electronic cannabis delivery system, I would include in the 3rd line, and I think that should say inhaling from the device instead of inhaling the device. Just a minor word
Okay.
exclusion.
Yeah. Okay. Any comments on that? Okay. Next page. So vapor, you'll find that definition on page 139 of the Public Act 21-1. And then I have another question, and I think it's just good to bring up for discussion. But to Karen's point, this might be why it's not included here. So where it says real property at the end of the last paragraph, it says real property means the land and all temporary and permanent structures comprising the district's administrative office buildings and includes, but is not limited to. In the next couple of policies, it's defined with a list. You'll see it in the next one. It says classrooms, hallways, storage facilities, theaters, gymnasiums, fields, and parking lots. So I was wondering if we wanted to have consistency with the definition through our policies on real property. So real property, the last line, it says, but is not limited to. So if you look in the next policy, was defined there as classrooms, hallways, storage facilities, theaters, gymnasiums, fields, and parking lots. So we would be adding in classrooms, hallways, theaters, gymnasiums, and fields.
Yeah, it's interesting because it has the definition under D, right? But then later it has its so it has D, and then later in towards page 3 of 3, it minimizes real property, but includes on school transportation. Which it doesn't in D.
I mean, we could come back to it because it is in.
I think it needs to be consistent, Rachel. I think you're right. I think it needs to be consistent. I think you need to define it every single time consistently. I think that's very important.
Because you will find it again too in policy 4118.231, but instead of real property, they call it school property. And it's the exact same definition, with listing out classroom, hallways, storage facilities, theaters, and gymnasiums. You know, to Karen's point, I was thinking, okay, well, community, so are the community in those places, but what if they are coming to open house, right? Or coming to a show in our theaters, or in our gymnasiums for a sport game?
A question that I have, Rachel, that I'm not sure that we can answer, but maybe we need to ask. Is the definition of real property different when it comes to the possession of deadly weapons and firearms versus smoking?
Okay.
I just jump in. Typically, real property is, we talk about the physical plant and spaces. So I think when we get into, I think it defines that and includes all the elements of what I would consider real property. And then they're going to expand it to school transportation, because that is something you have to consider on board school buses and vans and stuff like that. So I think the way real property is listed is correct, because I wouldn't consider school transportation real property.
Okay.
I think you want to add that at some point.
But
I
not,
don't know if this complicates matters, and I don't mean to further complicate a complicated situation, but when we get to student discipline, and I know that that's a different series than what we're talking about now, the school bus and virtual environments are applicable for school policy for discipline. So I don't know if those, and again, I know we're talking about, I'm sure Karen will give me a good explanation because of the different series why it doesn't apply, but I just don't want to create something that sounds contradictory once we get to the student discipline policy.
True, but this is smoking, so you're not smoking virtually
Yeah, but
unless we want that.
I don't think we want.
No.
no, I also think that we just have to consider, again, we could certainly ask why it's defined differently, but when it talks about other exceptions, that's when it adds in the school transportation. Because as Joe said, it's not considered real property, so it's another exception.
Right.
So why don't we, if this is good with the committee, why don't we move forward, but like just table this question and come back to it at the end of our meeting? Is that fair? That way we can go through the other policies and maybe it will become more clear.
Well,
And
I
if
just,
not-
real quick, I may have missed this because, as Dr. De Silva will tell you, I have internet problems sometimes. But we also, in the community section, when we talk about the real property, we don't reference the actual school buildings. We just talk about the administration buildings. And I was wondering why we did that.
Hmm. That's a very good question.
Yeah, that needs to be in there.
That's a very good question.
But it goes with just, it's the same thing really, that we just should be consistent how we define it in every policy.
Real property is, yes, yes, temporary, permanent, real property is.
Because to
True,
whoever,
true. The other, again, just in, I don't know if it helps or not, but when you look at the prohibition against smoking, the first paragraph, it says including any area of school building, including but not limited to any indoor facility owned or leased by the board for the provision of routine or regular preschool, et cetera. I don't know, I guess, to your point, Ken, I don't know why that, to me, it seems like they may have written like policies in isolation, right?
Oh,
It
sure.
feels like, but that the last 3 lines on page 2 of 2 are just thrown in there. But I think what the what the intent is in that first paragraph of 1 of 2. That's when it talks about the school buildings and anything that's owned or
Oh,
leased.
agree. But in like, just for example, in policy 1700, which just happened to be the next one,
Yeah.
real property means the land and all temporary and permanent structures comprising the district elementary and secondary schools. So there we're defining it completely different. And then, oh, sorry, next page, and administrative buildings. So we're including it there. Why would we not define real property the same in both? But yeah, no, the policy addresses school buildings. We're just talking specifically about the definition of real property.
I see your point.
Mhm.
Okay, let's, that's the only question on this policy then, right? Is about the real property that I brought up. Okay, let's go on to the next one, and then we will come back to that. Because maybe it will become clearer. So the next policy, RPS policy 1700, that was last revised 3/22/21. As per the Fall and Shipman Goodwin update, they revised this policy to clarify that deadly weapons and firearms are prohibited on school transportation. The law has always prohibited possession of deadly weapons and firearms at school-sponsored activities, which includes school transportation. This revision specifies that these include school transportation. So I think a fairly easy update. They're just including school transportation in here, using the language. Are there any questions on this policy or the revisions of this policy?
Right. So I'm assuming ghost guns, totally 100% firearm. Ghost guns are a little tricky, I know. I mean, I'm just wondering, we have sawed-off shotgun, machine gun, rifle, shotgun. Would it behoove us to put in ghost gun?
I think that language, Selena, comes right from the statute. That's why that language is the way it is. I don't know that there's anything that prevents us from putting it there, but I think that's why the language is specifically written in that particular way.
Yeah, and that was a point I was going to bring up too, given New Milford, that I think that should be included.
But right.
I mean, we do have the right to add.
Yeah.
We could put firearm means, and then we could put any ghost gun, and then we could put open parentheses, any sawed off, and then the rest of this. So we're just saying it's not included in the general statute, but we're adding it in as Ridgefield Public Schools. Is that, Ms. Moritz, is that what you were, and Selena, was that what you were?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how you would, yeah, but I would like to see that in there.
Can I ask a question though? How is it different than
Any other weapon?
any other? Yeah, I mean, other than it's assembled at home and they're ordering parts, right? But essentially it becomes.
It's a more current title for the weapon. I mean, it's more,
Well, it would be a very simple thing to do revolver, comma, ghost gun, or any other weapon, or other weapon. I mean, it wouldn't be a problem to add that. The caveat to that is, I don't know that everybody that's reading it will know what a ghost gun is, so we would have to define what a ghost gun is.
But isn't it, and pardon my ignorance on ghost guns, but isn't it theoretically any one of these?
it could be, yeah.
Defined as other, it could be defined as.
I think it might, it's probably smart to put it in there because they're changing. Ghost guns are ever changing. And so it might just save us to have it in there. I feel like it's safer to have it in there than not to have it in there because of what's happening across the country. I think it's really smart to put it in.
I mean, I have no objection. Does
No,
anyone
I
else?
just, the way in which it's written though, Rachel, we would just have to put it after the statute
Okay,
because we can't, if we're citing the statute, then we have to.
Right.
Could we do like a BA and say this definition includes ghost guns, and then define what a ghost gun is in a little subsection?
my my only question to that would be, we're not defining all the others, right? So I don't know if it nitpicks too much, right? I think we should.
But I think if you ask them, yes, I mean, technically, yes, but if you ask somebody what a shotgun is, they have a good idea. If you ask somebody what a ghost gun is, I think a good portion of the population might go, I have no idea what that is. I couldn't define it right now.
I couldn't-
But that's what my point is that, isn't it all of that? In other words, from what I know about it, right, is you're gathering different materials, it's untraceable, and you can create.
You're building your own gun.
You can
Building
create a
your own gun.
rifle, you can create a machine gun, you can create anything. All the difference is that it's just not traceable, and I'm building it myself because I have the different parts.
Mhm.
So it could
And it's important to maybe put in the definition parts ghost gun or parts of a ghost gun, because you don't want somebody to bring it to school and assemble it at school. I think it's very important that we have that in there.
So the
A
only,
ghost gun can be quickly assembled, and somebody could bring that to school. It would possibly not even be detected.
With all due respect, it's not easy to assemble a ghost gun. You're literally building a gun with all the parts. So it's not something you could take into the bathroom and build in 5 minutes, for sure.
Some of them are fairly simple to put together.
Just looking at the definition here, I mean, it calls it as a privately made firearm. How's that? We can use that language.
Right, but to Dr. De Silva's point, in that case, then it's still a firearm as defined by statute. It's still a shotgun or revolver
or other weapon. Yeah.
I'm not opposed. It's not that I'm opposed to adding it in, not at all. And maybe there's a place for it. That's not at all what I'm suggesting. And I just, it can't be, I don't think it can be added in if we're going to cite the Connecticut General
Right.
Statute. So it would have to be, like you said, Ken, like another, maybe like a,
BA. B,
yeah. Or
lowercase.
it could simply be C, and then peace officer becomes D, and then C says firearm, but basically it's those things, right? It could be any one of those. I don't know enough, but I wouldn't want to limit it to just ghost gun, or maybe it is. It's just C is ghost gun.
And I think it would have to be B. It would have to be a sub of B, subsection of B, just from a structure perspective.
Yeah,
We
sure.
were going to add it.
What, so would the committee be on the same page if we tried to write something, a subset of B on B? So we'll have A, firearm, and then B under B, ghost gun, separate? Is that what we're aiming for?
I personally, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's already captured by the statute. However, I would not object to it being in there.
Okay. Tom, how do you feel?
I think it's captured by the language of the statute, and these criminal statutes are vetted through the Criminal Justice Commission pretty carefully. That being said, though, I certainly have no objection to adding it if it doesn't, if the inclusion of it doesn't somehow imply that other things are excluded, which is sometimes a principle of
Good point.
interpretation of law.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. No, it's an excellent point. I mean, I kind of feel the same way that you do. You know, I'm not opposed to putting it in, but it does say or other weapon.
Oh, that's right.
It's just that, to me, it's just how that particular weapon is made, and it's built, as Joe said, it's built by the person at home rather than by Smith & Wesson or Remington or name the gun manufacturer. So it's more where it comes from, but it's still covered by one of the names or other weapon according to statute.
Yeah, these private in-home weapons, they discharge just like a company-made
Right.
firearm. So they're captured by the language of the statute. But I think Selena's point is, because this stuff's now proliferating, it'd be good to bring some attention to it. I think is kind of what I'm hearing is the intent behind this request. So I think it's for good for good purpose, but I wouldn't want it to somehow be misinterpreted that by including this particular private in-home gun, we're excluding other types of weapons. I don't think it would be, but it's just,
Well, I absolutely agree that attention should be brought to that. But, this committee has barely read these policies. So I don't think that the general public is going to read these policies to the extent that mentioning ghost guns in here is going to have any type of educational or, informative benefit. So maybe that is a very good point, and maybe we need to be talking about that, but in a different form than within a policy.
I mean, it is covered whether loaded or unloaded from which a shot may be. Deadly weapon covers it. The first one, A, covers it. I mean, to Tom's point, my concern is like I said before, is one person could bring a piece, another person could bring a piece, and how do we talk to that? There's no language that prohibits that right now. And then you can put it together in an hour, basically. I mean, if you know what you're doing.
If you know what you're doing, sure. An hour for sure.
So, nothing speaks to that. It's not illegal for one child to bring a piece of a ghost gun and another one. It's only illegal when they put it together. So, yeah, I don't know how we do that.
So why don't we, Dr. Silva, would you think it would be fair if we just looked into this a little bit, maybe?
We could. The other thing that Selena just made me think about, though, this policy is a little confusing, and let me explain why. Because Selena just reminded me when she brought that point up about kids bringing different pieces in, that it's about students, where this policy, again, just to go back, is about community. Right. So this would be different. However, after I said that, what's confusing about this policy actually is if you go to page 3 of 3, where it talks about like,
Student.
then it goes into consequences and it's connected to kids. So it's a little bit confusing.
Any student, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because as Selena was bringing that up, I'm like, oh, right, good point. But then I'm thinking, okay, this is a community policy, but then it throws in here a student. So, but I guess, yeah, I don't.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's just an odd.
B
Yeah, it's out of place almost.
Yeah, B should be removed from this policy, I think.
Yeah.
Because the student discipline policy would still apply even outside of school hours, wouldn't it?
Yes. But my guess is they put it in here because of this language, but it's just it's odd because it's a community policy.
Yeah, it's out of place.
Yeah, it's not anywhere else, and it's not even referenced.
Right.
Yeah.
The only thing, so if you look at the last page, under the note, connecting community, it says under state law, in order to prohibit all persons from carrying deadly weapons and or firearms onto school property, including persons who hold a legal permit to carry such weapons elsewhere, a school district must affirmatively pass a policy prohibiting such items. So students would be part of a community.
Right.
I think that's why they're probably in here.
Right, because you could be a community member and also a student who has a legal permit to carry such a weapon. That's what I think, right? Is that what you're saying, Rachel?
Right. That's what I'm saying. So I think that's why.
No, I think it's saying that
it comes up here.
Isn't it saying though that you have to pass a law to prohibit anybody from carrying a deadly weapon into school property or into, say, even
Right.
football game. So, an adult, even if
Right.
they're not a student.
Right. It's both. Right. But that's what I'm saying is it may be trying to push through the students who may be
An
both,
18-year-old, yes.
right, maybe categorized into both.
Right, but there's also a student policy, so they're covered by two policies. And then you run the risk of, is the language different in both policies? So which policy is going to apply to students? I think it's cleaner if students aren't part of this, if there's no good reason for them to be.
So perhaps, Rachel, as I'm thinking about the student discipline policy in 5114,
Okay.
I think you may be frozen. Oh, she's back.
Can you guys hear
Wasn't
me?
me.
Okay. Good.
I had a
Can
joke
you hear
between,
me?
yes, you're perfect between Ken and your Wi-Fi, but I won't make it. But I wonder, Rachel, if we can revisit, I was just suggesting maybe we revisit 1700 also after we get through 5114, where it talks about deadly weapon. I think maybe it'll answer Selena's question.
Sure. Is that good with everybody? We'll just move on for right now. We'll come back on that question. Oh, okay. So then the next one, RPS policy 4118.231. This was last revised on 10/13/20. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you guys hear me?
yes,
Oh.
We
Guys,
can't.
Can you hear me?
we can. It's delayed, but we can.
Can you hear me now? Oh, okay, cool.
That's
So as per the fall shipment, oh, you can't hear me?
Keep going. We're good. Keep going.
Okay. So as per the fall shipment and Goodwin update, they have revised. Oh, I know I'm doing something. You guys can't hear me.
We can, Rachel, we can hear you. It's a little delayed, but we can hear you. Keep going.
Okay. We have revised this policy in light of sections 86 and 87 of June special session, Public Act number 21-1. They further revised the policy to clarify that while Connecticut law allows for the legal use of marijuana. Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Under certain circumstances, because marijuana use is still prohibited under federal law, the use of marijuana at work or outside of work, if it impairs an employee's ability to perform their job, constitutes a violation of this policy. So taking a look at it, these are the definitions that I had gone over in the first policy. That's why I did that, so that you knew exactly which sections they came from Public Act 21-1. Are there any questions with this policy? I don't see any hands up or anybody want to call out.
Can you see my hand, Rachel?
Okay.
It's Ken.
So that one I think was pretty easy because the purpose was to establish a workplace that is free of the effects of alcohol and secondhand smoke and free from drug abuse. I think the corrections were
Yeah, although I would
pretty
ask, I have a
clear,
question,
straightforward.
Rachel,
Okay,
I'm not
the
sure
next
that,
policy up, student discipline.
Can't hear us, I think.
So
hang on, I'm
the
gonna,
student
I'll
discipline
message her.
policy actually has 3 major revisions. But the first one, we actually already did. We approved and revised on 3/29/22 the definition of bullying. Yes, Ken. Yes, Ken.
You're super delayed.
Ken.
There were some questions. Dr. De Silva had one, I had one. Can you hear us?
Ken?
Rachel is not in my dining room, by the way. This is not me today.
Yeah, Rachel, try to log off and log back in.
Or Susie, she could also call in. Or if she turns her camera off, sometimes that helps with it.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah, it helps
John
me.
messaging. Yep. There we go. Ken, while
man.
she's logging off and logging back
All
in,
right,
I don't
no
know if
problem. I'm
anyone
sorry,
else.
guys. Can you hear me now?
Oh, Rachel, yep, we can hear you.
I can hear you.
Oh, man.
You're fine now. Try now. Rachel, do you want to log off and log back in? Okay. While she does that, Ken, I'm not sure if anyone else is wondering about the language that in policy 4218.231, the word if seems a little odd, right? The use of marijuana at work or outside of work, if it impairs an employee's ability to perform their job, constitutes a violation of this policy.
Yep.
Anyone else wonder about the if?
So Susie, I noticed that as well. So I was just assuming, which we can talk about, that Shipman and Goodwin was trying not to by the law between the Connecticut statute of use versus impairment, but I don't know for sure. So I saw that this afternoon as well. So if they're not impaired, you may not know, and would it violate the policy?
Right.
It's a question. I agree with you. I saw that as well.
And then who determines whether they're impaired or not? And what's the definition of impaired? And
Okay, I'm back. Can you guys hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to stay like this. Sorry about that.
It was fine. Rachel, so we are still on policy 4118.231. The question that I had that Karen noticed, and I think some others may have noticed it as well, that when you were describing the policy changes related to the statute of legal use of marijuana, I'm sure you noticed that word if, so or outside of work, if it impairs an employee's ability to perform their job. So I guess that word was a little bit confusing. I'm not sure that you have the answer, but if people would feel more comfortable, I can get that from Shipman, especially if we have a list of other questions later.
Sure. Where is that word?
So the page, on the top of page 2 of 3.
Okay, 2 or 3.
While Connecticut law allows for the legal use of marijuana under certain circumstances, because marijuana use is still prohibited under federal law, the use of marijuana at work or outside of work, if it impairs an employee's ability to perform their job, constitutes a violation of this policy. I actually think I feel like I understand the outside of work. It's the marijuana at work. Like, so in other words, are they trying to say here, if you're using marijuana every day outside of work and you can't get to work on time, or
it impairs your ability to work, then it's a problem. I think that's the distinction.
But the use of marijuana at work is the one that's the problem.
So Susie, I don't know.
The impairment doesn't relate. The impairment doesn't relate to the use of marijuana at work. That's prohibited. The impaired only relates to the use outside of work. At least that's how I read it.
yeah,
Oh,
the language says.
Yeah, or outside of work if it impairs. Yeah,
In other
Yeah,
words,
that's
I agree with Thomas.
Yeah,
Outside of work?
prohibited at work and outside of work if it
yes.
impairs
Okay.
your work.
Thank you, Thomas. Okay.
right, because if you use it in marijuana, if you use it at work, we don't care whether you're impaired. That's a policy violation. If you use it outside of work, that's not going to be a policy violation unless it impairs your ability to work.
Understood. Perfect.
It's the commas, the confusing commas.
Commas only provide clarity, not confusion. avoid confusion.
Thank you.
Just since we're right in that section, the sentence right below that,
Okay,
up to and including possible termination of employment, I think the possible is redundant, or at least unnecessary.
Oh, because of the may result?
Yeah, it may result in termination of employment. It's
Yeah.
That's a good point.
but also halfway down there, we need to do the from between inhaling the device, because that would
oh,
be
good.
inhaling the device is much different than inhaling from the device.
Inhaling from the device.
And since I have the floor, why are we defining cannabis in this policy but not in the other policies?
So this is for, so we do,
I didn't miss it. I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. So on policy.
Oh yeah, there it is. I see it.
1331,
Hold on, I see it in 1331.
yeah, it's there.
Oh, good. I
It's
apologize.
No,
I had missed it on 1331. I had missed it.
no.
Yep. Okay, cool.
Anything else on this
Good.
policy? Okay, so we're good on this policy then, right? So this one can move forward to the full board?
Well,
Let's
I think we
proceed.
need, before we do that, I think we need to clarify how we're defining school property or real property, or just so it's consistent with all the policies.
Okay, yes, because in here, if
Yes.
you guys see, they call it school property.
Right.
Yes.
One point back, and I'm going to go back to that one, that 1331. I think the challenge there, I think it's just clumsily worded. The first paragraph, to what Dr. De Silva was saying, talks about the school buildings, and that last paragraph is meant to add in the administrative buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Further,
I
because
So-
adding the word further.
So I think if we said something like, in addition to school buildings, real property means the land and all blah, 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 the administrative. That would fix it. That's also a little clumsy. Maybe we could even add administrative buildings to that first paragraph, and then we don't need that whole last paragraph.
Okay.
So that might help
well-
with the definitions.
Okay.
Sorry to take us back.
Okay, so that one, okay, so that one, we just have to get clarity, like you said again, on real property, school property, and we can combine that. I do agree with you. It does say regular preschool, kindergarten, elementary, or secondary education. They're just not consistent in putting it all together, and I am a little OCD, so I would appreciate it that it's all together and not in two different paragraphs. It's driving me crazy. Okay, so on 1331, I think I could put something together. Dr. De Silva, we could work on that if that's fair, and
Yeah,
we could bring
sounds
that
good.
one forward to the board. Okay. So there's nothing else on 4118.231. So is it okay, guys, to move on now to student discipline?
I think so.
All right. So I'm gonna read this. I don't know if you guys heard me or not before. So the student discipline policy, there's 3 updates to this policy, but it is a 27-page policy. So please, at any time, if there's feedback, I know you guys have gotten this beforehand. If there's feedback on any page definition, we could absolutely go over it. I'm just going to start with the revisions. The first one, we actually already did. So that's easy enough. It's on page 8 of 27, and it's bullying. And when we updated the bullying policy, we brought this policy forward and updated the definition. So we're good there. The next thing that we have to revise is, as per the Fall and Shipman Goodwin update, that they have revised with Public Act number 21-1, General Statute 10-221D, to require that on and after January 1st, 2022, policies adopted in conformity with Connecticut General Statute 10-154A concerning the use, sale, or possession of alcohol or controlled drugs by students on school property shall not result in a student facing greater discipline, punishment, or sanction for the use, sale, or possession of cannabis than they would face for the use, sale, or the possession of alcohol. I can't see you guys, so please just jump in. So on page 4 of 27, you will see this update. It is part D. The one thing I could say about this in reading through this policy is part D under section 2, to me, just really codifies our current language, which I think is important to note, because if you look in section 3, number 15, it already says possession, sale, distribution, use, or consumption of tobacco, electronic nicotine delivery systems, vapor products, or the unlawful possession, sale, distribution, use, or consumption of drugs, narcotics, or alcoholic beverages. So it already mentions it, but I think the update, it further clarifies that it goes to electronic or includes electronic cannabis delivery system, and just that actual definition of it, and then how it fits into our policy. Any questions, feedback on that update or revision?
Nope.
So I think it codifies current practice, which I think it's important for community to understand. Okay, I can't see you guys, so I'm gonna go on to number 3. So the third update is we have also revised references to remote learning to ensure they align with the new definition of remote learning in Public Act 21-46. So if you look at that, that is on page 3 of 27, letter R. Any questions there, feedback, comments?
Rachel, no one has their hands up yet. I know you can't see.
Okay.
Oh, Ken does.
Oh, go ahead, Ken.
So, so if they wanted to smoke a cigarette at home, they can't be on camera. When they do it, this goes back. We had another policy where the mask policy, like how are we now policing masks in the house? Technically they're participating, as we're defining it here. We're defining it technically as school or school grounds. Do they have to wear the mask at home, which is nonsensical? But the same thing here, like if they want to go to the bathroom and take a hit off their vape pen, not that that's a good thing to do, but would that be violating this policy?
Well, if
Dr.
they,
Silva,
yeah, sorry, Rachel. So if they went to the bathroom and took a hit off their vape pen and we knew, then that would be violating the school policy. And we knew.
How would we
Because
know?
the home is not the context that makes school, it's their participation to the virtual environment. Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
We're not policing their home. We're policing their behavior as they're in school, which is through Google Meet.
So that hour and a half that they're supposed to be with us,
Yep.
they're following our school rules.
Right.
After
Is
that hour and a half,
Is that clear from this paragraph? We're talking about the environment in which students are engaged.
Well, and in this case, the environment is primarily Google Meet. Secondarily, because we do have students, I will note that we have students who participate in homebound instruction, not in the home and not in the schools.
Right.
It could be at another site. It could be at our Board of Ed offices. It could be at the town library.
Right.
And these would still apply.
Okay.
Right. I think that's an excellent conversation and more to what an educational environment is. Thank you, Dr. Hanaway.
Yep.
Any other questions on this policy? It's a big policy, but of course, if there's any questions, any part, please ask.
okay, Ken has his hand up, and then I just wanted to bring up a point, but go ahead, Ken. Rachel, you want to call on Ken?
I just on page 1, there's just some grammatical things. We need a space between in making and such under the new C.
Yeah.
More of a general question though is the definitions here in policy 5114 are much more robust than in 1700, and I was just curious why.
Well, that's why I wanted to bring it back up. So can you, you got to where I was going to land. So Selena, when you look at what's connected to students, which is really what your question was originally when we were back in community, and I was a little stuck there. I think when you look at deadly weapons here, I'm not sure, Ken, why it's more robust, but I think that when you look at both deadly weapon here and just firearm here in H, Selena, and P, and then do you feel more comfortable with the way in which those definitions are when it's connected directly to students versus the community policy, which you, I think, had the question about if student A, B, and C bring in different parts and then create. Do you feel like this captures it? They talk even about the design of the weapon.
Yeah.
And modifying the design.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does capture it better. But I mean, the other policy speaks to it more, but I mean, it is in here too. The statute.
Oh, Selena, hang on, you ended up on mute.
Selena's not in the other living room either now.
In the other policy, the first statute, when it speaks to it as a whole, it doesn't speak to it separately. This one talks about the term destructive device also includes any combination of parts, either designed or intended for use in converting any device. So that does speak to a ghost gun indirectly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not quite directly, but.
I still obviously would like to see the term somewhere, but I think I'm just being maybe picky because I don't see that anywhere. And I know they're becoming more and more of a problem. But I'm not going to be nitpicky about that.
Okay.
I mean, that actually might be the intention of this.
I think it is because I'm trying to visualize what other thing it could actually be,
Right.
Selena. So I think that, and they're probably staying away from a term like that because a term could be used now and change
Yep.
Right.
and referred to as something else.
Being more broad. So that it could
Well,
be
and
used
that captures it if somebody comes up with a different name for it,
Right.
like you said, so.
Right.
I think it probably was intentionally vague.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with that.
Did anyone notice that
Okay.
dangerous instrument includes a dog? Keep your chihuahuas to yourself.
But is there a reason why the definitions are more robust for students than for
Community?
community?
Because I think it's unlikely that several community members are going to, I mean, could it happen? Sure. But I don't think that I think that well, I'm not sure. My only wonder is that if it's like Thomas said earlier, intentionally broad to capture everything with kids.
And also, community members aren't probably going to meet and put a gun together. So.
No. Well, no, I'm just saying, but here but in the students, we talk about a weapon such as a pellet gun, a modified pellet gun, or airsoft pistol. That's not so.
But I think it's intentionally specific for kids, so
Okay.
that there isn't lack of clarity, where I think broader to capture anything for the community. That's my guess. Certainly, Ken, I think we can ask that question, but I would imagine that's why.
Because it does, there's no, in the way that it's written now in 1700. Yeah, I guess just be included in another web. Yeah, okay. Was just curious.
And think about how the 1700s refers to the statute, where it's far tighter for kids than even the statute.
Okay.
As it
Because
should.
it's a student, so you want to be able to have a discipline plan going forward if it should happen. So more specific. Yeah. Any other questions on this policy? Okay, I can't see you guys. So I'm just going to go on unless someone wants to.
We're good, Rachel. We're good.
Thank you, Selena. Thank you. Okay, so the next policy is policy 5131.6, and it was last revised 9/23/19. They revised this policy in light of section 19, June special session, Public Act number 21-1, which revises the Connecticut General Statute 10-221D. This is very similar update as per the last policy 5114. So in taking a look at this policy, I know I can't see you guys, but please call out for any questions on this one. This is drug and alcohol use by students.
I'm okay. I'm not close.
Rachel, it doesn't look like anyone has any questions on this one.
I'm good.
Okay, great. So this, everyone's good. So this one could go for a first read. So I think it's 7:57, but I think we could actually do one more because the next one is super short. This is RPS policy 6146.1 graded practice. And I'm gonna defer to Ms. Gillette. She's been phenomenal in working on this with her team.
Okay. So very quickly, the previous policy that we had in place at RPS included some of this information and that you see here with some additions now. And it also included the weighted grading policy. So if you remember the last meeting we had or the one prior, we created an entirely new standalone weighted grading policy. So what was left and what was important to maintain was a policy around the grading practices K-12 in the district. So really what this aims to do is to give an overview of what those grading practices are. And we suggested that all those specific grade ranges, the letters that were previously in the policy are really not what the goal of this policy is, which is to just give an overall understanding of what the grading practices and what the communication is around them.
And just to add, when we looked at this, we actually looked at this policy and went to other school districts as well, and to see what they had, because there really wasn't anything new from CABE or Shipman that we could refer to. So we pulled, although albeit short, we pulled from our own policy and then a couple of other districts. And I think what we felt was important is that it stayed within broad strokes, because as we change our grading practices, what's important for families to know is when will progress be reported, and that we're communicating progress to parents. And so that's why you'll notice that's a very broad stroke. So for example, at the elementary level, well, it certainly identifies that the superintendent or their designee will ensure that parents are notified of the policy so they know when progress is reported. In addition to that, there's a common evaluation system. So kids at one school are not being graded differently than at another school. So if you're in kindergarten, your progress is going to be marked similarly. Same that, you know, we report progress to students in grades K-5 3 times a year. Grades 6 through 12 have progress reports quarterly. How that, in that it's uniform, how that progress, how we report that progress may evolve, right? So we may go from, you know, a standards-based progress report to a numerical progress report to a alphabetic progress report. But so long as it's uniform and we communicate it, that's what we felt was important here. Different than conferences, we have another policy that speaks to that. So this is really about grading practices in general. And again, once you remove the weighting grading from this policy, which is now in a new one, there wasn't much left. So we just wanted it to be consistent and broad. Rachel, Ken has a question. Can I call on him?
Sure, go ahead.
Is there any value in even broadly defining how that's going to be communicated? How they're going to be notified? So notified through the student portal or the parent portal, or notified is a little up in the air, and I could see someone saying, well, I was never notified.
Yeah. So we could say, even if it's timing, like at the start of the year, in the early fall or something like that, right?
Right, timing, yes. So will be updated in the portal, you know, before the start of the school year or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, we can.
The only thing though that we could get a little in the weeds on that with the times and the portals, because there's different ways that we're communicating to parents. So we have the handbook also. Every handbook is updated every year, so parents get that sent to them. It's also linked to the website. So I don't know if we want to get too into the weeds on how.
I think we should codify at least one way.
Yeah, or at least at the start of the year through, you know, the principal communication or something.
Yeah, maybe principal communication method. Yeah.
10 other ways, that's even better.
Okay.
The other thing, I don't know, this is just something that just, and that would apply for the second section also, the dates established by.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just say interesting the term quarterly, because it's quarterly according to the year, to the school year, not quarterly according to the calendar year. So it was just.
Yeah.
If they counted, I mean, that's a bad one, but I always thought, wait a minute, they're not during the summer, but yeah, I have to pull myself back on that.
The quarters of the school year.
Yeah, it's commonly used.
Yes.
So
yes.
Commonly accepted.
Okay. That sounds great to me. Any other comments?
So Rachel, what would be the part? So we have, I think, several of the policies are ready to move to the full board with the with the confirmation of the consistency with the definition of school property or real property. Is that something that we could make consistent between now and the board meeting and still bring it up at the board meeting, or would it have to come back to committee?
No, we could definitely bring it forward for our first read. When is our next meeting? Our next meeting is
Monday.
1 week.
Monday.
We can try, Rachel, try to get that information.
Yeah, you know what? We can always try, and if not, there's always another Board of Education meeting. You know, rather do it right and do it right the first time than go too fast, right?
That's true.
Rachel, Selena had a question also.
Oh no, I didn't. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, I saw you unmute.
So number 7 we'll table everyone for next time. And to Ken's point, I just want to go through these policies, but I think, Ken, you pretty much summed it up beautifully. So policy 1331 could go forward. We're just going to, if we can, check on real property and school property. Policy 1700, we're okay with leaving out ghost gun now because of the additional language that we saw in another policy. 4118.231 was ready to move forward. I am going to correct, and you had 2 comments, inhaling from. I got those down. And then on 5114, I think we were good on that policy. Again, we're just checking on school property and real property. 5131.6, that was good. We could go forward for a first read, and 6146.1 could go forward for a first read. So as Ken said beautifully, I think it's just really the real property and school property and just like a from inserted.
Yeah. And then-
Anybody else have anything? Yes, I'm sorry, Ken, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, just you didn't mention it, but the school property, real property thing is also in 1700. It's in all of those. I just wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're throughout. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else? Any other questions, comments?
Great
Yep.
job,
Okay.
especially with the little mess up, Rachel. You did a great job.
We're
Thank
into
you,
entering
Selena.
time right now, so that's perfect.
Thanks. I really appreciate everyone's work on these. I know there was a lot of reading and preparation for tonight, but I think this committee just does a really fabulous job in asking great questions and moving forward. So thank you. And do we have a motion to adjourn? It's at 8:06.
So move.
So moved. I think that's
Second.
10. That's Selena.
Yeah.
Okay,
second.
everyone have a wonderful evening.
Thank you,
so much,
Rachel.
everyone.
Thank you,
So much.
everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Be safe.